we begin, I would like to thank Abhishri ma'am for such a refreshing short exercise. And a very good afternoon to everyone. We are very excited to host this workshop today and look forward to your active participation. Please note that this webinar is also being streamed live on YouTube. We welcome all of you to this 1 hour workshop. This session is designed by the Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing, a constituent department under Symbiosis International University. We are a team of robust mental health professionals working under the guidance and leadership of our head and consultant psychiatrist, Dr. Girija Mahale. Before we begin, I am excited to introduce you to the services of SKU and how it contributes towards a resilient community in SIU, both through preventive and interventive mental health services. SKU has 4 verticals under its aegis, namely the academic wing, the service wing, the research wing, and the school wing. All the 4 verticals are established with the vision to support a compassionate and thriving community by cultivating emotional resilience and wellness amongst the youth and amongst the individuals, destigmatizing and demedicalizing mental illness. We provide mental health support to individual members of the SIU community, which includes our students, faculty, staff, and parents by offering one-on-one counseling sessions. We also provide safe spaces for them to explore the topics related to mental well-being during our workshops and group counseling sessions. The academic wing gives us the opportunity to execute our vision through quality education. Our work at SKU is rooted in evidence-based research, and we understand that the role the research plays in innovation. An offshoot of this belief drives our research wing, which was established to study the outcomes of our work in the SIU community and beyond. The work our team does at SKU has inspired the theme of today's workshop. Here, I would like to invite our speakers, Ms. Priyanka Bajaria and Ms. Yoshita Thadani, who are both counselors with our team, to please begin this session.
Thank you, Akshita. So before we begin, I would like to thank all of you for giving us your time just after lunch. I'm sure you guys are probably feeling quite lethargic, so I'm very grateful for your time, and I hope that the activity we had before this was helpful to bring you back to the present, right? So before we begin the main content of the workshop, I would like to take a moment to outline the structure of what we are going to do today so that we have something to navigate towards, right? During the pandemic, which is still ongoing, it's become like a universal stressor for most of us, and we've experienced burnout and other distressing feelings. For example, during the initial months of the lockdown in India, I was personally very, very worried that, what if I get COVID? What if my family gets COVID? And there were these other worrisome, fearful, anxiety-provoking thoughts. Soon, as the time passed and the restrictions increased, the anxiety moved to frustration and a feeling of, almost like helplessness towards the whole situation. As it moved further, it also kind of brought feelings of sadness within me, right? Now, what I would like you all to do is take a second to recollect some of the feelings that you experienced in the past 1 year. And I'm just going to give 10 seconds to it. If you want to share it in the chat room, please feel free to. What were some of the feelings you experienced during the lockdown? People experience anxiety, sadness, pretty much the same graph, which is what all of us kind of we were into to this together, right? Now imagine if we were consumed by all of these feelings for a very prolonged period of time, and it was difficult for us to separate them from ourselves, right? What do you think would happen? Wouldn't it affect the quality of our life? It would affect our relationships. It would affect the way we work and our professional life as well. Now, in context with this, what we will first like to focus on is what resilience is, what does it mean to be a resilient person in the time of the pandemic and otherwise? And how? What are some of the tools that will help us develop this innate quality and skill to develop personal resilience? Now, remember the time when we used to fly very, very regularly and we were allowed to fly? During the instructions given on flights, it was usually directed by the purser that you always put on your oxygen mask before putting on another person's mask during an emergency, right? It could be your child, it could be your partner, it could be anybody. Why this was told is unless you have the capacity to kind of be safe, you are not going to be able to reach out and help the other person. This is why we are going to start. The first half of our workshop is going to be about understanding personal resilience. We're going to take an inside out approach. And once we are familiar with some tools, we're going to move on to understand how we can develop resilience outside, which is in our community, to kind of foster a spirit of um, mental well-being among all the stakeholders in a university setting. Now, taking forward the previous analogy of the oxygen mask, once we have put on the oxygen mask, which is the first half of the workshop, it will give you the strength to then reach out with the tools that you will learn for community resilience. Before I go on to the definition, I want to quickly share something with you. So I was watching a webinar recently conducted by the former UN Deputy Secretary General, Lord Mark Malloch-Brown, and he forecasted that the motive word, or like the buzzword post-COVID is likely to be resilience, right? And this really struck with me because in academic circles, in research, in on social media, in almost all platforms, the word resilience is so ubiquitous. It's something that we hear around us all the time. But do we really know what it means, what the essence is, or are we just hearing it as a buzzword around us? Let's find out. So what we're seeing on the slide now is going to be the definition of resilience, and I have put on one of the many definitions that are available. Many definitions by different theorists, right? Now, the one that I've put on is by the American Psychological Association. And while there are different ways resilience is conceptualized in theory, two main core ideas come out of these definitions. The first is that this person, okay, in question, has experienced risk or adversity. They've experienced some kind of a situation which is very stressful, very distressing, and very difficult to manage, right? And after that, they have experienced this tragedy or trauma, they have demonstrative positive functioning almost immediately after, right? And this definition is true not just for individuals or people, but also for systems, right? So if we have to look at resilience as a part of a system and as a very dynamic concept, it is just a way for us to adapt successfully to the disturbances that threaten the functioning of a particular system. Now, like I said earlier, this concept can be applied to different systems around us, interacting at many levels. So, for example, it could also be a living or non-living thing, like a microorganism, a child, a family, a security system, an economy, a forest, or the global climate. It doesn't have to just be a human being to kind of portray resilience in that sense, right? Now, to understand this concept further, let us take the example which all of us are so familiar with in the present, which is COVID, right? Now, this COVID, which is a global adversity, which is something which is out of the blue, it came into our lives, and it is a distressing situation, demands systemic resilience. So resilience not just from us as individuals, but from governments, from communities, from the world over. And it has impacted, like I said, not only individual entities, but also communities at large. And not just communities, also different industries at large. So, in that sense, we all have to interact together to demonstrate resilience and kind of come back to positive functioning after this adversity, right? So, I see around 231 people on the chat, which is great. So, can we have a thumbs up if you understood what resilience means? Because I'm going to go on to more nuances of it. Great. Now, um, why I'm spending so much time in explaining this term and what it means is that, like I said, we've heard it, we have used it in our conversation, we've read it so many places, but we tend to use the term very loosely, and that can be a little dangerous given how common it has become in our daily lifestyle, right? Now, you may have seen online that the most basic definition of view of resilience is that the person bounces back from adversity. And I don't think this is the most helpful way of understanding resilience. Because if you hear the word phrase bouncing back, it basically kind of, personally visualize a childhood toy I had. For all the people who are from India, you might relate to this. And for the international audience, I would just like to explain what this toy was. It was basically an inflatable chest high hit me panda, right? Like when you punch it, it just falls to the floor but springs back immediately to an upright position, and it always has a smile on its face. So bouncing back basically suggests, in this case, an effortless recovery from any kind of difficulty with barely any hair out of place. It's my I got up like this look, right? So, um, a very poised recovery, which is not always true. That's not how we recover or we come back from adversity. And if this is something we internalize by seeing it on media, or like expecting this for us to happen, to be a resilient individual, it becomes some kind of an ideal that we wish to aspire, and it is most likely to trigger very self-deprecating thoughts. We might see ourselves as weak or inadequate if we don't follow that linear path that media portrays us about resilience, right? And in times of crisis, that can be actually very counterproductive, right? This is especially more relevant in social media, when social media is involved, because think about it. Today, if I want to put up a picture, okay, I'm going to open my Instagram and I want to put up a selfie, am I going to choose pictures in which I look my best, or am I going to go for like the 10th best one? Right? So we all want to put up our successes on social media because it's where we archive or document the best of us. But what we don't see is the pain and the vulnerability behind that picture, which is a very personal and unique journey, right? So let's not get blinded by everything that we see, and let's live that journey in the present moment. Now, another helpful idea about resilience is that we feel that because we've been polished, it's like a diamond, that we've been polished by hard times, we're now immune, or nothing can harm us or crush us in the future. You might have heard the term, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But is that really always the case? No matter how robust you've become by dealing with tough times, you still remain vulnerable to coping poorly with future adversity, right? Or future difficult times. Vulnerability, my friends, is not a sign of weakness. no human has an absolute resistance to stress or difficulty. And resilience cannot be seen as this fixed attribute, something you're born with, and something that just magically appears when some life changes happen, right? It is very dynamic. When circumstances change, your resilience can also alter based on where you are at that age and that stage in life, right? But that's good news because it means that resilience can be cultivated. It is not a passive skill that just comes once in a while. It's a skill that you cultivate by experiencing different life events, and as you grow, you learn from your mistakes as well, right? So to kind of summarize this idea, what I would like to share is that there is a difference between resilience and recovery. And I would like you all to also see the picture that you see on the screen, the tree, which is so resilient in all the climatic conditions that it's exposed to throughout the year. Now, the difference between recovery and resilience, though both are responses to a traumatic event or a tragedy, is that recovery is basically a temporary period of emotional instability. For example, post a breakup, a person may be expressing signs of depression, or post a war, right? A soldier might experience post traumatic stress disorder for a few months up to years, right? Followed by a gradual return to healthy functioning. Now, this is recovery. It's like all of us have these internal tools that we use to come back to normal after a tragedy or after a difficult time. But what kind of sets apart resilience from recovery is that it is marked by relatively stable, normal levels of psychological and physical functioning throughout the negative life situation, right? So here you are probably more equipped with tools to handle the life situation in a more stable way that doesn't completely make you dysfunctional in your social, personal, and professional life. So now let's go on to understanding what are the tools you can use to build resilience, right? Resilience basically requires a biological, psychological, social, cultural, economic, political lens, the biopsychosocial model, right? Because human beings do not exist in isolation. We interact with different systems in our life, with other people in our lives, with, with communities. And in that sense, our resilience is not just something that depends on our internal characteristics, which is great because it means that you are not the only one accountable for being resilient. You also need to have a responsive system to help you build that skill, right? Now, to aid our understanding of resilience, I have referenced a beautiful model, the resilience donut model proposed by clinical psychologist Lynn Worsley and her team. Now, if you can see on the screen, the donut elucidates the internal and external factors that influence the development of resilience. And these factors, internal factors, which are in the circle in between the inner circle, and the outer circle is basically where the external factors that influence resilience are mentioned, right? And why do we have these two different factors? Because we may not, like I said earlier, have sole control or total control over these external factors or the outside of the donut, right? The social factor, the parent factor, cultural, political factors, we don't always have full control over it. Which is why, for this particular part at least, I'm going to be focusing on the personal, which is the biological and personality factors that you have way more agency and control over, right? Because that is something you can take away with and start putting into action immediately. And my friend and colleague who's going to speak next, Yoshita, will be talking about how communities can build resilience. So let's take 3 deep breaths to focus and come back, because I'm going to be talking about the tools which you can take back. You can either focus on it, listen to it, remember, or take down notes, because this is going to be a very important actionable point that you can take away. So 3 deep breaths on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Hoping all of you are back in the present moment. Let's look at the first phrase which is there in the inner circle, right? The first stem phrase is I have, right? So whenever you're in a situation where you're probably facing a difficult time, the words I have will help you identify the resources that you can make use of to combat this situation, to fight this situation, right? I'm going to give you an example from my therapy room. Recently, one of the students who I was in a therapy session with shared that their family got tested positive with COVID, sadly, right? Now, her parents were quarantined in their respective rooms while she had to look after the house and the related chores. Now, for this 19-year-old who has not, kind of reached a stage where she was independent in terms of handling household work, it was a very overwhelming experience, because it was not just that she needed to focus on, but there were also online lectures, exams, and kind of taking care of meals. So it was too much for her to handle, right? Now, in this difficult time, she shared with me that she was very grateful because her neighbors were of great help, right? They checked in on her regularly, they got groceries for her, for the family, and even helped her with the meals, right? Now, for this student, by showing gratitude and acknowledging that these resources are available to her, this girl could build on her strength to face this difficult time that she was facing. So during a time when you are, kind of facing a difficult situation, I would suggest that you use the stem phrase I have, because it's going to help you immediately, automatically identify the resources and tools that are available to you externally to kind of bank on, right? Great. So just take a moment to take that in. The second stem phrase, which is a part of the inner circle, is I am. Now, this stem phrase will help you identify your inner strengths that are required to navigate your personal issues, right? Or your personal losses. Now, I'm going to give you a very simple tip, and this is basically improving your self esteem and self concept. I'm going to give you a very basic tip to do that on a regular basis. And this is something you can use whether you're in a difficult situation or in general, because, like, resilience is a muscle that you build over time, right? You don't always fight when the fire starts. You always also need to have a plan in place beforehand. So, what I would suggest you do to improve your self esteem and not kind of always criticize yourself is avoid any global evaluation or rating for yourself, right? I'm going to give you a very simple example to demonstrate this. For example, I am somebody who usually tends to keep deadlines. Like, I'm pretty close to the deadline. Like, I won't finish the work way ahead of time or in time. I will start doing work probably a night before. Especially when I was a student, it was difficult for me to follow a certain timetable, right? Now, imagine at that time if I constantly rated myself as being a bad student or being a lazy student, or I procrastinate, I'm a procrastinator. is that information or is that labeling really helping me in any way to kind of overcome that situation? What can you do instead? What you can do instead is say that, um, yes, I have a tendency to procrastinate. I have a tendency to procrastinate and I'm working on it. So the next time I have a deadline, I'm going to start working on it at least 1 week in advance. So in that sense, you're not rating yourself globally as a completely bad person, but you're also then doing something about it, right? Because what happens is in the original problem, when you're just saying, I am a bad student, now you are not only dealing with your procrastination, but you're also dealing with that ball and chain of dragging around kind of self-deprecating thoughts which are pulling you down even further, right? I hope this was helpful. If it is, then you can write to me, and if you want to discuss it further in Q&A, we totally can. Now, my final point before I, move the give the mic to Yoshita is the STEM phrase in the inner circle, I can. Now, this I can will remind you of the control you have over the situation or the agency you have over the situation, right? Like I said earlier, situations may not fully be in our control. For example, with the second wave of the COVID pandemic hitting most of the countries around the world, there is a very major fatigue setting in, right? While the pandemic will take its own course and multiple agencies and systems are working around the world to combat it, to fight it, what can we directly do to contribute to our personal resilience during this time instead of just being frustrated about it, right? What you can do is redirect your frustration and find ways in which you can support your well being by creating a daily routine, by exercising, by creating, like by talking to your friends online. Now, you may not be able to control the overall situation, but you can definitely influence how you spend your time. And this can also instill a very problem solving mindset in you, right? So, these three techniques are what I would like you all to take away from developing personal resilience. And put in perspective, these techniques may seem very, very overly simple, but we tend to overlook them during crisis, right? I urge you all to practice these simple strategies and build your resilience reserve. It's like a bank. I personally, and a lot of like academicians around the world, personally view resilience as an emotional capital that needs to be invested in regularly. And a special message to all the students who are listening into this, that the earlier you invest, the bigger returns you get in the future, right? With this, I would like to invite my dear friend and colleague, Yoshita, to take over and tell us about how stakeholders in a university setup, that is, the systems that sustain the university, can contribute to resilient youth in the community. I hope you enjoyed so far.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for your poised presentation. I think you very eloquently explained what resilience is by bolstering it with examples that all of us can relate to today. So I hope the audience has taken away the relevant pointers that Priyanka wanted you to take away from her part of the presentation today. So now let's look at how to build that community resilience that we've been talking about in a university setup. So to be able to do this, we're going to focus on three important stakeholders in a university setup that contribute to building this resilience. So the first that we will cover, the first important stakeholder that we will cover are parents. The second would be faculty members. And the third is the youth communities itself, because without speaking about the youth themselves, it would be extremely incomplete to speak about community resilience. Okay, so Akshata, if you could move to the next slide, thank you. As you know, as a parent, you serve as a very core role model for the youth. The process of building this resilience in youth starts from childhood in the relationships that you foster with children. The way you interact with them from birth sets the stage for how children will go on to developing as well as engaging in each and every important personal relationship that they have or professional relationship. So establishing these relationships with the youth where they are not only allowed but also encouraged to come to you with their experiences, including their emotional experiences, is very significant. Teaching them feeling words from a very young age will help them make sense of their experiences much better. But to be able to do that, the first thing that we need to do as parents is to improve our own understanding of emotions and what their functionalities are. Now, we come from a culture where we're often disallowed or we're looked down upon for sharing our emotions. Usually, when you showcase that you're angry or you're sad, you are told to avoid doing so because it is seen as a waste of time or it is simply seen as unhelpful. Now, some are even gender specific, right? Like you must have seen that boys of our culture are not allowed to cry or they're told to stop crying every time they end up crying when they are young. So they're discouraged from showing particular kinds of emotions. But these misconceptions of not allowing people to show their emotions from a very young age can be extremely harmful. This is why we, as parents, as important stakeholders in the youth's lives, need to be able to understand these concepts, clarify our own misconceptions and biases, and it is only then we will be able to role model these behaviors for our youth, right? Now, this sets the stage for allowing open and safe channels of communication with them. This will also encourage them to come to you not only when they're having a good day, but also when they're having a distressing day or a bad day. Now, for example, given the current online education scenario, this online education has been forced upon both students as well as teachers, right? And both parties are struggling equally. It's important as a parent to allow your child to come to you and very openly and freely speak about what obstacles they might be experiencing during their online education journey. Often what happens is we don't allow our child to speak through their problem and we jump to problem solving and we tell them, we give them blanket advice like, hey, if you go and sit and study for long enough, you'll be able to manage whatever it is that is not happening. And as you may have noticed through this example, in general, when a young person comes to us with a problem, we jump to advice giving or giving solutions. Now, over here, our intention is usually to help. And whilst our intention is pure, the tools that we use in this conversation are counterproductive. It is important to first provide a listening ear to your child, allow them to speak through their experience, and instead of jumping to problem solving for them, give them the space to first explain to you what is happening. So in this example that I mentioned above, if your child does come to you telling you that, mom or dad, I'm struggling with online education, and they're trying to explain to you what's happening, use your words, use your gestures, use your body language, use your expressions to convey to them that I'm there to listen to you and I am listening to you right now. Try to keep an open mind, try to encourage an open posture. This will allow them to speak to you more openly and more freely. Often we are so busy thinking about what to respond that we lose out on what our children are saying to us. Communicate that you are listening, paraphrase what you've heard back to them. This will allow you the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings that you may have. It will also convey to your child that I'm listening to you. Now, once they have spoken through these problems, set the stage for collaborative problem solving. Now, as an adult, you may know better, so you can help them navigate through this process. It's important for it to be collaborative, and the younger that you start with them, the better. Now, this further instills in them the sense of confidence that if they're able to solve their problems from now, that they will be able to do so in the future as well, because problems are part of life, right? So instill this collaborative approach, give them the opportunity to brainstorm solutions with you and navigate this process for them. Lastly, as parents, I'd like to give you a very small tip that you can use in your daily interactions. Now you know that sometimes people just come to you because they want to share their problems and not really looking for solutions or advice or suggestions. So one thing that you can do when your child comes to you with a problem is simply ask them, would you prefer for me to just listen to you, or do you want me to actively problem solve with you? This simple question will help clarify your role from the start and can also avoid misunderstandings. So these skills are never too late to start incorporating in your relationships with your children as well as our budding youth. Okay, so I'm going to take maybe a short break here and give you guys 5 to 10 seconds to let me know if you have any questions. You can post them on the chat and we will definitely be addressing them towards the end of our session. Let's move on to the faculty members at university setups. You can say that faculty members are like parental figures in universities, right? They play a very active and important role in youth development through the course of their educational endeavors. So I'd like to start by stating a study that I read about. It was a meta-analysis that was a compilation of 99 research projects, and it basically concluded that student-teacher relationships are very important and are linked to student engagement as well as their achievement. And even one positive relationship with one caring adult can change the trajectory for even the most at-risk student. So currently, since we're using online mode for lectures, for workshops, conferences, webinars, it's important for faculty members to take some time out in the beginning of their lectures to simply connect with their students. Ask them how they're doing, ask them how they're coping, and try to initiate a positive relationship from your end. However, by saying this, I also want to encourage students to do the same. Remember that you and your teachers are both experiencing adversities right now. It is not just you. Asking your teacher how they're doing, initiating a relationship from your end can also go a very, very long way. Moving on, I'd encourage faculty members to take an empathetic and compassionate approach when dealing with students who may be showcasing academic trouble, instead of an instant punitive approach. For example, if you notice that a student is consistently failing tests, missing your lectures, turning in assignments late, it might be helpful to first have a conversation with that student to try and understand what the problem is, where the issue lies. And this helps because you won't jump to a conclusion in your mind that the student is simply a slacker or they're not interested in putting enough work into that subject. It's important that faculty members approach these kind of situations with an open mind and non-judgmentally. Now, prior to the lockdown, an issue that had become widespread on college campuses across the globe is that of substance abuse. Students were often getting caught with substances or caught using substances on campuses. Now, such cases, as we have observed, are usually taken up by disciplinary committees of universities because it is viewed as breaking the law. However, substance abuse issues often arise from underlying mental health issues that a person might be experiencing. And because of this, when you discipline or you punish the child, it does not cure the underlying mental health issue that persists. And often, even after the child has been disciplined, such as they've been suspended or they've, been given punishments, they are still seen to continue using substances. It is therefore very important that universities start engaging in creative problem solving here. And this process in this particular example would include getting mental health professionals on board whilst reviewing such cases in the first place. Once that is done, we can then step out of the box and look at these certain problems such as substance abuse, in a new light. And once we're able to do that, we can intervene in a way that is the most appropriate and helpful for the student as well as the community that that student is in. And of course, we can't discuss the development of resilient youth without factoring the youth themselves and the very intrinsic part that youth communities play in this process. So I'd like to take a different focus for this particular slide, where I will be shedding light specifically upon how social media, digital media, and the like has influenced the way the youth think, act, and behave. We all know that digital age has come upon us, and because this digital age has come upon us, we are wired for instant gratification. And this instant gratification that we are wired for has really impacted both youth platonic as well as romantic relationships. And you must have noticed yourself, right, that these relationships that the youth tend to get into these days appear more fragile than ever. There's also an added issue for the youth to maintain a digital identity versus a non-digital identity. And often these two identities are very different from one another. So here I'm going to take a second and I'm going to ask you, both students and adults, to take a second, think about your digital identity, be it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Think of this identity that you portray yourself to be online, and then take a second to reflect upon what your personal identity is actually offline. And if you could maybe drop in a line on my chat telling me what you think of when you compare your digital identity and when you compare your offline identity. Is it same? Is it different? Is it wildly different? Do you feel forced to portray a persona that you feel like the community wants to see? Great. I'm getting a couple of responses. Some are saying that they try to keep their identity is very similar, keep them separate, and that they like it that way. Thank you for sharing your experiences with me. Now, I'd like to move on to what the youth these days call FOMO, or the fear of missing out. So this is one of the worries that has really engulfed our youth today. And they are pressured to showcase their best lives on social media, even if these best lives aren't actualities. In this race to be the best, what is happening is, as Mr. Bose very rightly said in his inaugural speech today, that we seem to be losing touch with our values and the people that we are. Social media has also made it very easy for the youth to engage in unhealthy comparisons with one another with the click of their fingers. These issues have led to them experiencing crippling self-esteem these days. They tend to very easily doubt their own abilities. And when one is operating from such a shaky base, they are very quick to judge other people as well, right? And this automatically tends to impact their relationship with other people. Now, these are just some of the unhealthy trends that we have noticed lately, since we do tend to interact very widely with student populations. Now, some of the skills that the youth can build to overcome these issues that are key to building resilience in youth communities are as follows. First and foremost, patience and tolerance. It is extremely important that you remember that we are wired to expect instant gratification due to the amount we use social media today. Unfortunately, whilst dealing with adversities, it is very unlikely to find a quick solution that will eradicate your distress immediately. Be wary of this reality. Engage in building your patience and tolerance levels very actively. Priyanka shared a great tip to do this when she spoke about improving personal resilience earlier. So I hope that you remember and you can connect the dots. Hatred, vile comments, bullying, shaming, judging other people are all very common and widespread these days. I think it's very rare for us to pause and actually try to understand or question where other people are coming from. It is worthwhile for the youth to step out of themselves, their own thought processes, and try to be empathetic and compassionate towards others. Simple but widespread habits like gossip are extremely dangerous and toxic. It perpetuates the idea that knowing one side of the story and judging people is the way things are. Simply trying to draw boundaries with respect to engaging in gossip culture can be very helpful. Not to add, disabling from this negative talk has its own perks. Try to find other healthier ways to bond with your friends. Invest time in also building your own sense of self because this is very important. Like again, Mr. Bose said, take some time to connect with yourself, explore your values, your attitudes, your likes, your dislikes, befriend yourself. You will find yourself engaging in many more healthier relationships when you find that you are acting from a base such as that is so secure and solid. And lastly, experiencing distress is a normal part of life, right? I mean, we all have been experiencing this pandemic for over a year now, and our distress levels have gone off the charts. Everything has gotten disrupted, from education to professions to your relationships. So distress is a very common part of life. Engage in developing healthy coping mechanisms such as healthy support systems, reaching out for help when needed, reflective journaling, art and craft, meditating, instead of relying on unhealthy short-term coping strategies such as substance abuse, mindless social media usage, and binging on TV shows endlessly. A very hands-on way in which the youth can create a safe peer community for themselves on campus is by establishing peer mentors. Now you may ask, what is a peer mentor? So a peer mentor is basically a youth that is chosen specifically because maybe they have interest in the field of mental health, or maybe because they play the role of agony aunts in their friend's life very often. So these youth are basically trained in basic listening, empathy, and psychological first aid skills. They act as a bridge in the community. So students who may be experiencing distress can approach their peer mentor who can help them out, or based on the situation, can refer them to an appropriate mental health practitioner who can take it forward. Peer mentors are usually supervised by mental health professionals. Therefore, ethical and other issues do not crop up. And it gives the added benefit for students who might be interested in mental health and psychology to experience the practical aspects as well. So these are just a few suggestions that we would like to convey that will help us build a resilient community on campuses and universities. And with that, I would like to ask you the question on the slide. So we've given you a lot of tips, we've given you a lot of takeaways. Take a second and think of this. What is the one thing that you now affirm to do as a stakeholder to enable the development of resilient youth? You might be a parent, you might be a teacher, you might be part of the youth community itself, you might be a policymaker. I'm sure some of the points you might have found relevant. Take a second, think of what applies the most to you. It can be something really simple, like, okay, I will be more open in my conversations. I will try to not judge people instantly by looking at a social media post. It can be absolutely anything. And if you wish, you can even post a few of your comments on the chat for others to see, or you can send them to me personally. But this is something that I would really like for you to think about, because this is one thing that you can very actively take away and start implementing in your daily life. Amazing. I'm getting quite a few responses. Someone wants to be able to tackle every situation. Someone is messaging that they will try to implement a willingness to understand others and create a safe space with non-judgmental attitude. Beautiful. I'm so happy to see these responses pop up. I affirm to take care of my physical health. Great. It's okay if you can't actively think of it and post right now, but I would like for you to carry this thought on even after the workshop, even after the conference, and try to act on it as well. So I know it's quite cliche to end workshops with quotes. However, here's a quote that I thought helps showcase the current pulse of the planet amidst the pandemic. This pandemic seems to be never ending. And here's a beautiful quote by Robert Jordan, a very famous American author. The oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must and survived. I think we all can agree that we've made it here. We've made it through this past terrible year, through a pandemic that was thrown our way. And I'm sure we all can identify with that willow or that picture that we can see on the slide, at least to a small extent. With that, I'd like to thank you all for patiently listening to us, and we hope that you found some, if not all of it, helpful. We are now open to answering questions.
Since we have a mix of questions on chat and privately as well, I would like to read out a question that I got on my personal chat, and we'll see which parts we would like to collaboratively answer. So there's a student, since it's private, I wouldn't read out the name, who has shared that, ma'am, in this pandemic condition, I'm very tired. He, the student is pursuing a degree in computer science, and he's facing a lot of problems, getting very frustrated, angry, and the online lectures are really draining the student out. There are no physical activities as such that they can engage in. So, what can they do to build resilience at this time? So, essentially, fatigue has set in, the pandemic, online lectures, and like the lack of the basic restraint and lack of movement. So, what are some of the strategies they can use? So here, thank you for first, sharing this with us. I understand that in a panel setup, sharing questions is not always very easy. So we are very grateful that you trust us with your questions. Um, I would start with you if you remember the donut model that I, kind of spoke about. Um, can no, we can't put that back, right? So I can, I have, I am, right? So here if we were to take the interactive approach where you would say I can, where you see the resources around you, maybe you can reach out to your faculty and say, ask them what is it that they can do to support you in this entire situation in terms of your online lectures, where you probably take a break for a few days or attend some lectures and look at some lectures later as recordings. In I am, you need to basically look at ways in kind of understanding this anger, right? Sometimes what we do is when we are angry, we reject those feelings, and in rejecting those feelings, we kind of bubble it up so much that it comes out as this kind of volcano on one particular day. So what can you do? Like when you are angry, just sit with it. It's like a kind of wave. Ride with it. Journal. Ask yourself, what is it that this anger is telling me? Which needs of mine are not being met? And you already said that you miss physical activities. So in the capacity that you do have, what is it that you can do? Even if it's your room or your house, what are some of the physical activities like yoga, pranayam, or kind of skipping? What is it that you can do with the resources that you have, right? So this will cover your I have, your I am, and your I can very beautifully, which is actually a great example of how we can apply this concept in our own lives and with our own problems. So I hope that answers your question. Is there anything you would like to add, Yoshita? Please go for it.
So Priyanka, I think you very well explained how to use the donut model. And this was a good practical example to showcase how to use the model. There's just one thing that I'd like to add. See, it's very normal that students these days, they're sitting from 9 to 5 just attending lectures, and because it's online, it's often not very interactive, so you do tend to get bored. But it's important to recognize that even in between your lectures, you try to take a break from your laptop, from any device that you're using. Take a 5 minute timeout. Go lie down on the bed if you want, stretch your body a little, get back into the zone, grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, whatever it is. Take that 5 minute break between your lectures. It is extremely important to be able to do so. Also, I think the rest was very well put across by Priyanka. So we can move on to the next question
Thank
if
you.
there are any.
And also here I would like to add for all the students and everybody who's facing fatigue is that it's like a natural curve, right? Like once you're angry and then there's the fatigue is basically just the grief or the sadness of not being able to do the things you normally can, right? And in this situation, even backed by heavy research, social connection really helps. Like I've read so many researches with evidence that at a time when you're experiencing fatigue, connecting socially, this comes in your I have a set of support system or a set of friends that I can reach out to. And then again, your having is not enough. I can reach out to them, right? I can pick up the call and call my friend and say, hey, I'm really angry today and this is how I feel. So sharing how you feel also becomes a very important part of this. And sometimes because we are so tired of the situation, we just like अब सबको परेशान नहीं करना है. But it's important that you reach out to a friend of yours or a relative. So do we have any other questions? I had this which covered a lot of questions that I got. So
We can maybe encourage the rest to send across their questions if they wish to. We'll
yeah,
provide an email ID to them on the chat. And if anyone has questions now or later, you can always reach out to us on the email ID that we'll send you. And we will definitely ensure to reply, trying to answer your questions to the best of our abilities.
yes. And there's a student who's written in asking, what do I do when I feel demotivated? Some of the same kind of tips apply to this question as well. So, you can refer to that where you use the I am, I can, I have model to build your resilience, right? And with this, we would like to kind of, move to the next part. But we also would be sending a feedback form at the end and at the end of the conference where we will ask you about the workshop, and if you have any feedback or questions you can put it on that and we will ensure that we get back to you. So thank you so much for listening in, guys. Akshada, is there any parting words you would like to say?
Thank you all for joining our session today. And I would like to thank Yoshita and Priyanka for their wonderful presentation and for clearing everybody's doubts. And I hope we can carry everything that we learned today and apply it in real life, which would be a great success for this learning opportunity. So, with this, I would like to end today's workshop. And thank you all once again for coming.
And thank you, Akshada, for being a great moderator.
Thank you, Akshada. Thank you, Ketki.